Hi guys, so I wanted to make this video quickly around this. So this is quite an old tent. I picked this up in a charity shop a week or so ago. It's made by Vaude, the German company, and I know they do make some very nice quality tents. So the tent itself is called the Vaude Lightwing, which I believe is quite an old model. But why I'm making this video is because this tent is in fact nearly new. It doesn't appear to have really ever been used properly, if at all, and it uses this super lightweight ripstop nylon. I don't think it's the silicone type, although it does feel like it might be the silicone type considering how transparent it is. It's fairly lightweight, so it says it's 1.9 kilograms, but on weighing it, it does weigh 1.5, which does make it feasible for an ultralight one-man tent. It actually sleeps two people. It was sold to me as a one-man. It was labelled up as a one-person tent, but I know it is built for two people. So initially when I found the tent, I just noticed this bag, and it was a sort of ripstop nylon. There's quite a few other cheaper tents there. There's a bit tatty, there's a few holes in places. And then I saw that it had a roll top closure, and as far as I know, especially with older tents, they didn't make many cheaper tents with a roll top closure. So I didn't see anything else, I just purchased it. It was £3 or £4, I believe. Super cheap in this roll top bag. I did check to make sure that the poles and the pegs were in the bag, and both of them were in their correct packaging. So that sort of got me to purchase the tent. Anyway, I got into the car, and that's when I noticed the logo on the bottom with a picture of the tent. One thing I do check when I'm purchasing tents secondhand is I check to see what type of poles they are. Usually if they're aluminium or alloy poles, that's a good sign that it's a fairly okay, goodish tent. With more modern tents, not so much anymore, because a lot of Chinese tents now have aluminium poles. But for older tents especially, they were mostly fiberglass for the most part. But I just thought I would show you around this little tent. So it's very similar to, I think the new one is, or the relatively new one is the Terra Trio, Terra Quattro, or the Hogan, I believe. It's very similar in shape. It's just a single ridgeline pole, which actually does make them quite windproof tents. They are fairly stable in the wind despite only having one pole. Quite a nice low design. I can bring the sides down a lot lower, so potentially this would cater for more 3 to 4 season use potentially. As I mentioned, it's a nice lightweight ripstop material, which is still waterproof. I had this thing up in the rain and it was absolutely fine. There was no issues with it. Some pegging points around here, just the two guy lines. That's pretty much all you have for guying points. This one appears to be a little bit too short. It only stretches down to there, so I probably will be extending that a little bit more. You've got these two reinforced ventilation spots here. And let's take a look inside, shall we? So you have the nice option of being able to open the vestibule on both sides. So if the wind's coming from one side or the other, you can open them in accordance. Potentially you could put a trekking pole here to give you a bit of extra space, I suppose, but I wouldn't really need to. Just fold that back briefly. Obviously you could sleep with both of those completely open, and technically I suppose you could sleep without the fly sheet because it is an inner pitch first. So you've got a small vestibule, you've got a tension band that runs underneath to tension the hoop. As you can see, it's like a knife line there, like a ridge, very sharp. So if you face this with the prevailing wind behind you, that knife edge would really, really help act in a way like an aerofoil. Would be nice and sharp and protect you from most of the wind. You've got fairly steep sides on there, so I don't think this would take too much being battered from one side, although there's a lot of flex in there, so that's quite good. But Vaude, really, really nice company. They've been making sort of tents for 20, 30 years now, maybe even longer. They're always very, very nice designs, very different designs, I would say, or they're the originators. I think a lot of the Chinese companies tend to copy their sort of designs. You can tell the quality. They've got some nice alloy pegs here, really, really nice quality, reinforced down the center. As you can see there, really well made. They're all brand new with this tent. All the corners are tensioned. You have this small insert in here to keep the corners nice and rigid, giving you that nice bathtub effect. The ripstop nylon floor. There's a few spots, there's some mold here and there, or what used to be mold. Interestingly, you've got this visor here, so that leads me to believe you could use this without the fly sheet. An indication that it's an older design is the fact you've got a double zip. So if we just undo that here. So we'll need to reproof the ground sheet on this, I believe, which will be okay. It does have a double door, so nice sort of lightweight ripstoppy inner with a mesh outer, so you do have options to vent. But as you can see, it's quite a nice shape, quite a nice size, and although it's green on the outside, it does give you a very, very nice light coloration in here. Plenty of space for 2 people. I'm 5'11" and I can lie out perfectly fine in here. It has the sort of feeling of being in a ridge tent. It's a really, really strange feeling. It has that sort of triangular style. You've got these loops up here, which I can only presume are for a drying line, which stretch all the way to the front there, across the ridge line. You have relatively good headroom as well. Being a triangular tent, I can sit up absolutely fine in here, so if there's a couple of us, we could sit in here facing each other, have a good conversation. So this is the higher end here at the ridge point. It is fairly narrow, it's about hand width at the very top. But yeah, it's a nice design tent. Even if I were to sit at the back here at the lower end, as being 5'11", I can still sit up relatively well without my head contacting either of the 2 sides. As with most older tents, the seam tape does tend to give in the ghost over time. It's cracked in a few places. I've got this issue on my Mountain Hardwear tent at the moment. But to be honest, it's not actually been an issue. This ground sheet is still waterproof. In fact, I popped this tent up today on soaking wet grass. It had been raining yesterday, and so far, there are no signs of any water ingress, no damp spots. On my Mountain Hardwear sort of Trango-ish tent, there are a few signs, although it looks like there might be, I don't know if you can see that, a few spots here where the water is slowly seeping in. But to be honest, once you're on your mat, that's not really an issue for me. I probably will reproof this anyway. A couple of pockets as to be expected in a 2-man tent. You've got some nice pockets by the door. I think I'd probably sleep with my head towards the door, although if it were a little colder, I think I'd probably sleep my head more that end. But yeah, so what are your thoughts, guys? I think this probably is maybe a 4-season tent. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. It seems to be equipped like a 4-season tent in the fact that there's no vents in here. It is all one solid panel, obviously, except from the fly mesh, which is quite nice because you can sort of choose how much ventilation you want. Just tuck that in there with a little bit of ventilation, or you can zipper all the way down. Probably won't be using this tent much over the summer months, but in fact I was actually in the market for a more 3 to 4 season winter backpacking tent. I've got mountaineering tents, I've got a vintage Force 10 Mark II, or Mark III, sorry, which I use for most of my winter trips, but obviously being 6 kilograms, it's not ideal. So this sort of came along completely by accident, and yeah, it seems like a nice option. I've looked at Vowdy tents in the past, never actually invested in one. They tend to be quite expensive. And then to stumble across this one in a charity shop, it was a very, very good deal for the £3 or £4 I paid for it. And it's in very, very nice condition. I think it's probably only been used once. It's probably a typical case of someone someone having it as a present, or buying it and then not having the time to use it. They probably used it once or twice. Judging by the marks here, they probably used it a couple of times and then popped it away wet, and it's got a little bit of moisture damage, but apart from that, that usually washes out, to be honest. But yeah, very, very nice little two-person tent. I mean, there's not a lot of space in the vestibule. Even if we were to see if I can zip that up. There we go, zip it up nice and easily. There's very little space in the vestibule. It can come down closer to the ground, to be honest. It's not pitched in the best way. So there's enough space, I suppose, for a set of boots, a couple sets of boots. I don't, usually when I'm in my tent, I don't mind the tips of my boots sticking out under the side of the tent. Just because, you know, most boots are waterproof anyway, so, or they should be. Doesn't matter too much. And yeah, so you have got the option to drop that top bit down a little bit like that, so it's still protected by that sort of what's it called, vent cover, I suppose, to get a bit of ventilation through if you're using it in the summer months. But I probably wouldn't use this in the summer months. Yeah, so it's a nice little tent, you know, fairly okay space for cooking potentially. Storing a little bit of gear for the most part. You'd probably get your gear in here. So yeah, that's a quick look at the Vaude tent.